Captain Sarah Martinez sat alone in the intelligence analysis room at Fort Carson, Colorado, her eyes burning from 16 straight hours at the screen. The glow of the monitor lit her tired face as lines of data scrolled past. Numbers, coordinates, satellite images, intercepted communications. To most people, it looked like chaos. To Sarah, it was starting to tell a story, a dangerous story. She leaned forward, her pulse quickening. There it was again. The third instance in 72 hours. Unusual vehicle movement in a supposedly abandoned industrial zone, 40 miles outside of a forward operating base in an overseas conflict zone. The base housed 200 American soldiers, young men and women who trusted that people like Sarah were watching their backs. She cross-referenced the coordinates with thermal imaging. Her hands moved quickly across the keyboard, pulling up weeks of archived satellite footage. Then she saw it. The pattern was unmistakable. Every 48 hours, like clockwork, vehicles arrived at the same location. Always at night, always in groups of 3 or 4. They would stay for exactly 2 hours, then disappear. But that wasn't what made Sarah's stomach drop. It was what she found in the communications intercept from 6 hours ago. A fragment partially encoded that their system had flagged but not prioritized. When she ran it through the advanced algorithm she'd been developing on her own time, words emerged. Attack. American base. 3 days. And coordinates that matched exactly where those vehicles had been gathering. Sarah stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Her heart hammered. This was it. This was the real thing. After 3 years of analyzing data, filing reports, tracking patterns that usually amounted to nothing critical, she had found something that mattered. Something that could save lives. She glanced at the clock. 400 hours. 4 in the morning. She'd been at this since noon yesterday, but there was no time to sleep now. She had to build an airtight case. She had to make them listen. For the next 3 hours, Sarah compiled everything. She created a presentation with satellite imagery, communications intercepts, pattern analysis, and threat assessment. She mapped out the vehicle routes, identified the likely weapon caches, and calculated the probability of an imminent attack. 93%. Her hands shook slightly as she saved the file. She'd never reported anything with a probability that high. At 0700, she walked into the daily intelligence briefing. The room was full of officers, mostly men, most of them older than her 32 years. She was the only woman in the room, something she'd grown used to but never quite comfortable with. Lieutenant Colonel Davis was mid-sentence when she entered. He paused, glancing at her with thinly veiled irritation. "Captain Martinez, how nice of you to join us. Sir, I apologize for the interruption, but I have urgent intelligence that requires immediate attention." A few officers exchanged glances. One smirked. "Captain, we're in the middle of a briefing," Davis said. "Sir, this concerns an imminent threat to Fob Henderson. I believe there's a planned attack within 72 hours. The room went quiet. Then Major Briggs, a barrel-chested man who'd never hidden his belief that women didn't belong in combat intelligence, let out a short laugh. "Martinez, you've been watching too many movies." "Sir, I have data. Data that our entire intelligence network somehow missed but you magically found?" Briggs shook his head. "Sweetheart, maybe you should get some sleep." "You look exhausted," Sarah's jaw tightened. "Major, with respect, I've spent 16 hours analyzing patterns in vehicle movement, thermal signatures, and communications intercepts. The threat is real." Davis held up a hand. "Captain Martinez, you can submit your findings through proper channels. This briefing is for confirmed intelligence only." "Sir, there may not be time for proper channels." "That's enough." "Captain." Sarah stood there, her report clutched in her hand, feeling the weight of dismissive stares. But she wasn't going to give up. Not when lives were at stake. "I need to speak with General Hawkins," she said firmly. The room erupted in low chuckles. Davis's expression hardened. "Captain, you don't make demands here. You follow chain of command. Now either take your seat or leave this briefing." Sarah took a breath. "Then I formally request to present my findings to General Hawkins at his earliest availability." "Sir." Davis stared at her for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "Fine. I'll pass along your request. Now sit down." 2 hours later, Sarah found herself standing outside General William Hawkins's office. The general was a decorated veteran, a man who'd served in 3 conflicts and commanded respect from everyone in uniform. He was also known for running a tight ship and having little patience for what he called speculation and panic. His aide opened the door. "The general will see you now, Captain." Sarah walked in, spine straight, report in hand. General Hawkins sat behind a massive desk, his gray hair cut military short, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. "Captain Martinez, I hear you have urgent intelligence that couldn't wait for proper channels." "Yes, sir." Sarah opened her report, laying out the satellite images on his desk. "Sir, I've identified a pattern of suspicious activity at these coordinates 40 miles from FOB Henderson. Over the past 3 weeks, there have been regular vehicle movements to this location, always at night, always following the same—" "Captain," the general interrupted, glancing at the images for only a few seconds. "This is an abandoned industrial area. We've surveyed it multiple times. There's nothing there. Sir, the pattern suggests they're using it as a staging ground, and 6 hours ago we intercepted a communication that, when decoded, references an attack on an American base with coordinates that, when decoded using what method?" Sarah hesitated. "An algorithm I developed, sir. It's more advanced than our standard." General Hawkins held up his hand. "Stop right there. You're telling me you used an unauthorized, unverified algorithm to decode intelligence, and based on that, you're predicting an attack?" "Sir, the pattern analysis alone is significant. The vehicles, the thermal signatures. Captain Martinez, do you know how many false alarms we get every month? How many junior officers think they've cracked the code and found the next big threat?" He closed her report without looking at the rest of it. "We have an entire intelligence apparatus. Satellites, drones, human intelligence on the ground. If there was a credible threat to FOB Henderson, we would know about it. Sir, with respect, sometimes patterns are missed when—" "Are you suggesting that our intelligence network is incompetent?" "No, sir. I'm suggesting that this particular pattern required extensive cross-referencing that—" "Enough." General Hawkins stood up. His voice was hard now, his patience gone. "Captain, I don't know if you're trying to make a name for yourself or if you genuinely believe this, but either way, the answer is no. We will not be diverting resources or changing our operational posture based on unverified intelligence from an unauthorized source." Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. "Sir, American lives are at stake. American lives are always at stake, Captain. That's why we rely on verified intelligence and established protocols, not hunches and homemade computer programs." He sat back down, returning his attention to the papers on his desk. "You're dismissed, sir, dismissed, Captain." "That's an order." Sarah stood there for 3 full seconds, her mind racing, her heart pounding. Then she saluted, turned sharply, and walked out. As the door closed behind her, she heard the general's aide chuckle softly. "Another one trying to play hero," he muttered. Sarah walked down the hallway, her face burning, her hands clenched into fists. She'd been dismissed. Literally and figuratively. Her intelligence, her hours of work, her warning, all of it tossed aside. But she knew what she'd seen. She knew the threat was real, and she had less than 72 hours to prove it. The next morning, Sarah walked into the intelligence office and immediately felt the change in atmosphere. Conversation stopped when she entered. Eyes followed her. Someone had talked. Word had spread that she'd gone over heads, demanded time with the general, and presented what was now being called conspiracy theory intelligence. Lieutenant Morrison, one of the few colleagues she'd considered friendly, approached her carefully. "Sarah, hey. You okay?" "I'm fine. Look, I heard about yesterday. With the general." He lowered his voice. "Maybe you should let it go. You took your shot. You reported what you found. That's all you can do." Sarah turned to face him. "Jim, if I'm right, 200 soldiers are in danger. And if you're wrong, you're tanking your career over nothing." His expression was genuinely concerned. "I'm saying this as a friend. Sometimes you have to know when to step back." Before Sarah could respond, Major Briggs entered the room. "Martinez, my office now." She followed him into the small side office. He closed the door and turned to her with barely concealed anger. "What the hell were you thinking going directly to General Hawkins?" "I followed protocol, sir. I requested the meeting through Lieutenant Colonel Davis. You ambushed a briefing and demanded FaceTime with a 2-star general because you think you found something that our entire intelligence community missed." "I did find something, sir. The data is solid." Briggs stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Let me explain something to you, Captain. You're a good analyst. You're detail-oriented. You work hard. But you don't have the experience to make judgment calls like this. You panicked the general's staff, you disrupted command, and you did it all based on unverified intelligence using methods that haven't been approved. Sir, if you would just look at the data. I don't need to look at the data. The general reviewed your report. He said no. That means the answer is no. Briggs crossed his arms. You're being reassigned, effective immediately. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Reassigned? You'll be moved to administrative support. Filing, archiving, basic data entry, until you learn to work within the system instead of trying to be a cowboy. Sir, you can't. I can and I am. You're done with active intelligence analysis until further notice. His expression was cold now. Maybe this will teach you that being a good soldier means following orders, not chasing glory. Sarah stood there, shock and rage warring inside her. This isn't about glory, sir. This is about protecting our people. Then you should have trusted the people above you to do their jobs. Briggs opened the door. Report to Captain Stevens in admin. You start today. Sarah walked out of his office feeling like she'd been punched. Around her, colleagues averted their eyes. No one wanted to be associated with the analyst who'd been demoted for crying wolf. But as she packed up her desk, her hands moving mechanically through drawers and files, her mind was racing.
She had 60 hours left.
Maybe less. The attack timeline didn't care about her reassignment. It didn't care about chain of command or hurt egos. She slipped her tablet into her bag. The one with her personal copies of the data. It was against protocol to have intelligence on a personal device, but she'd backed up her analysis before the meeting with the general. Just in case. The administrative office was in a different building, a place where intelligence went to die in filing cabinets. Captain Stevens, a bored-looking officer counting days until retirement, barely glanced at Sarah when she reported. Martinez, right? Yeah, Briggs called. You'll be working on digitizing old reports. Desk is over there. Try not to cause any trouble. Sarah sat at the small desk in the corner, surrounded by boxes of paperwork from missions 5, 10, 15 years old. It was busy work. Punishment disguised as reassignment. But she still had her tablet. During her lunch break, Sarah sat in her car in the parking lot and opened her files. She went through everything again, checking her work, looking for any flaw in her analysis. Any reason to doubt what she'd found? There was nothing. If anything, new data from overnight made the threat more credible. There had been another vehicle movement. Same location, same pattern, 54 hours until the projected attack. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd hoped she wouldn't need. It rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered. Well, Sarah Martinez. Didn't expect to hear from you. Marcus, I need a favor. Marcus Reed was a former intelligence officer who'd left the military 3 years ago to work private sector. He now ran a security consulting firm that contracted with the Department of Defense. He and Sarah had worked together early in her career, and he'd always respected her skills. What kind of favor? His voice was cautious but curious. Sarah took a breath. The kind where I send you data and you tell me if I'm crazy. 20 minutes later, she'd encrypted and sent him everything. Her analysis, the satellite footage, the communications intercept, the vehicle patterns. Then she waited. Her phone rang an hour later. Sarah, where did you get this? I compiled it over the past 72 hours. Is it solid? There was a pause. It's more than solid. This is actionable intelligence. Have you reported this? I reported it to a 2-star general this morning. He dismissed it. Said it was unverified and unauthorized. Marcus swore softly. Sarah, this pattern matches known tactics from the insurgent group operating in that region. The communications intercept alone should have triggered a threat assessment. Who did you show this to? General Hawkins at Fort Carson. He wouldn't even review the full report. Hawkins? That old-school hard-ass? Marcus let out a long breath. Look, I have contacts at DIA. Let me make some calls, quietly. If this is what I think it is, there's no time for quiet, Marcus. I'm estimating 48 hours, maybe less, until they move. Then I'll make loud calls. Sit tight. And Sarah, you were right to trust your instincts on this. Sarah hung up and sat in her car staring at the base buildings around her. She'd done what she could through back channels, but she knew how slowly the bureaucracy moved. By the time Marcus's contacts reviewed the data, verified it, and pushed it up their chain of command, it might be too late. She thought about the soldiers at FOB Henderson. Young men and women, probably going about their daily routines right now, not knowing that someone was planning to attack them. Not knowing that the warning had already been raised and dismissed, Sarah made a decision. She drove back to her apartment and pulled out her personal laptop. If the official channels wouldn't listen, maybe she could find someone who would. She started reaching out to every contact she had. Former colleagues now stationed overseas, friends from her training days, anyone who might have a connection to FOB Henderson or the intelligence network supporting that region. Most didn't respond. A few told her to go through official channels. But then, late that night, she got a message from Captain Lisa Torres, a friend from her intelligence school days who was now stationed in Germany. "Sarah, I showed your data to my CO. He's concerned but can't act on it without official tasking, but he has a contact at Henderson. I forwarded your analysis. No promises, but at least someone there will see it. It wasn't much, but it was something." Sarah barely slept that night. She lay in bed running through scenarios. What if she was wrong? What if this was all an elaborate misread of innocent activity? She'd destroyed her career, gone around her chain of command, violated protocols. But then she thought about the data. The pattern. The intercepted communication. She'd checked and rechecked. She'd had Marcus verify it. She wasn't wrong. The next morning, Sarah reported back to the administrative office. She filed paperwork and scanned documents while checking her phone every few minutes. No news from Marcus. No updates from Lisa. 36 hours until the projected attack window. At 1400 hours, her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "DIA reviewed your data. They agree it's credible. But they can't override on-ground command without stronger evidence. They're requesting additional satellite coverage of the area. Should have results in 24 hours. 24 hours. Right at the edge of the attack window, Sarah texted back. Not fast enough. She stood up from her desk. Captain Stevens glanced over. "Going somewhere, Martinez?" "Bathroom, sir." She walked out of the building and stood in the cold Colorado air, her breath forming clouds. She was out of options. Out of channels. Out of time, no, she thought. There was one more option. A dangerous one. She could go public, not with classified intelligence that would land her in military prison. But she could raise enough noise that someone would be forced to look deeper. An anonymous tip to a journalist about ignored intelligence. A carefully worded post on a whistleblower site. But before she could spiral further down that path, her phone rang. "Unknown number. Captain Martinez?" "Yes." "This is Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, intelligence officer at FOB Henderson. I received an analysis forwarded from a colleague in Germany." "Your name was on it." Sarah's heart jumped. "Yes, sir. That was my analysis." "Captain, I'm going to ask you a direct question and I need a direct answer. How confident are you in this threat assessment?" Sarah didn't hesitate. 93%, sir." There was silence on the other end. "Then, that's oddly specific. It's based on pattern probability, communications analysis, and historical attack methodology in your region, sir." "I see." Another pause. "Captain, I've reviewed your data. It's compelling. But I'm in a difficult position. I have no official tasking to act on this. General Hawkins's office has made it clear that your intelligence is not verified." Sarah closed her eyes. Another dead end. "However," Hayes continued, "I didn't get to Lieutenant Colonel by ignoring credible threats, official or not. I'm going to increase security posture at Henderson. I can't evacuate or change major operations without orders, but I can put people on higher alert. If something happens, we'll be more ready than we would have been. Thank you, sir." "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If you're wrong about this, we've both got problems. And Captain, I respect what you did, going around your command to get this warning out. That took guts." The call ended. Sarah stood there feeling a tiny measure of relief. It wasn't enough. It wasn't full preparation. But it was better than nothing. 24 hours left. All she could do now was wait and pray she was wrong. But deep down she knew she wasn't. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat on her couch, laptop open, monitoring every news feed and intelligence update she could access with her now limited credentials. Her phone lay next to her, volume turned all the way up. The attack window had opened. According to her analysis, the most probable time was between 0300 and 0600 local time at FOB Henderson. That translated to between 1700 and 2000 hours Colorado time, 5 in the evening to 8 at night. She would know by tonight if she'd destroyed her career over nothing, or if she'd been the only one paying attention. At 1600 hours, she forced herself to eat something. Her hands shook as she made coffee. She thought about the soldiers at Henderson. She thought about Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who'd at least listened. She thought about General Hawkins, who'd dismissed her without a second glance. 1700 came and went. Nothing. 1800. Still nothing. At 1843, her phone rang. "Marcus, turn on the news. Now." Sarah grabbed her remote and switched on the television, her heart in her throat. She flipped to a 24-hour news channel. Breaking news banner across the screen. Reports coming in of an attack on a forward operating base in an undisclosed overseas location. Details are still emerging, but military sources confirm there has been an incident involving American forces. Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard on her couch, staring at the screen. She'd been right. "Sarah, you still there?" Marcus's voice on the phone. "I'm here. Early reports say they were ready for it. Increased security posture. They intercepted the attackers before they could do major damage. Some casualties, but it could have been so much worse. Casualties. The word hit Sarah like a bullet. People were hurt. Maybe killed. People she'd tried to warn. How many? Her voice was barely a whisper. Don't know yet. But Sarah, listen to me. If Hayes hadn't increased security based on your warning, this would have been catastrophic. You saved lives today." Sarah couldn't speak. She sat there watching the news coverage, feeling a horrible mix of vindication and grief. She'd been right. But people had still been hurt. Over the next 2 hours, details emerged. FOB Henderson had been attacked by a coordinated assault team using the exact route Sarah had identified. They'd staged from the exact coordinates she'd pinpointed. But because of Lieutenant Colonel Hayes's increased security posture, sentries had spotted them early. The base had been ready. 3 American soldiers wounded. None killed. 12 attackers neutralized, 4 captured. It could have been a massacre. Instead, it was a failed attack. Sarah's phone started ringing. First Morrison from her office. Then others. People who dismissed her, ignored her, mocked her. All suddenly wanting to know how she'd known. She didn't answer. At 2100 hours, there was a knock on her apartment door. Sarah opened it to find Lieutenant Colonel Davis standing there, his expression serious. "Captain Martinez, may I come in?" She stepped aside. Davis entered, looking uncomfortable in her small living room. "I'm sure you've seen the news," he said. "Yes, sir. General Hawkins wants to see you. Tomorrow morning, 0800. "Am I being charged with something, sir?" Her voice was flat. Davis met her eyes. "No, Captain. You're not being charged." He paused. "For what it's worth, I reviewed your full analysis tonight, after the attack. It was solid work. I should have looked at it more carefully before." Sarah said nothing. Davis cleared his throat. 0800. "Don't be late." He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "You did good, Martinez, whether anyone wants to admit it or not." After he left, Sarah sat in the silence of her apartment. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel proud. She felt exhausted and angry and sad. 3 soldiers wounded because a general's ego was more important than their safety. That night, Sarah finally slept, but her dreams were full of coordinates and warnings that no one would hear. The next morning, she put on her uniform and drove to base. She walked through the same hallways she'd walked 3 days ago, when she'd been a dismissed analyst with a rejected report. Now people stared for different reasons. Some with respect, some with shame, some with resentment. General Hawkins's aide showed her in immediately. The general stood by his window looking out at the mountains. He didn't turn when she entered. Captain Martinez, at ease. Sarah stood at ease, waiting. "I've spent the last 12 hours on phone calls," Hawkins said, still facing the window. "With CENTCOM, with DIA, with the Intelligence Oversight Committee. All of them asking me the same question. How did a captain at Fort Carson identify a threat that our entire forward intelligence apparatus missed?" He finally turned to face her. He looked older than he had 3 days ago. "Tired. I read your full report last night. All of it. Not just the summary I glanced at before." He moved to his desk. "Your analysis was thorough, innovative, and accurate. The vehicle patterns, the communications intercept, the attack probability assessment. All of it." Sarah waited. She knew there was a but coming. "But you violated protocol. You used an unauthorized algorithm. You went around your chain of command. You shared intelligence with outside contacts." His voice hardened. You put me in an impossible position, Captain. Sir, with respect, I tried to work within the chain of command. I reported through proper channels. I was dismissed, mocked, and reassigned to admin duty. What position did that put our soldiers in? The room went silent. Sarah knew she was crossing a line, but she didn't care anymore. Hawkins's jaw tightened. You're out of line, Captain. Yes, sir. I seem to be doing that a lot lately. But 3 soldiers are alive right now because I was out of line. How many would be dead if I'd stayed in it? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Hawkins did something Sarah didn't expect. He sat down heavily in his chair and rubbed his face. You're right, Sarah blinked. Sir, you're right, Captain. I dismissed you without giving your intelligence proper consideration. I was wrong. He looked up at her, and for the first time she saw something other than authority in his expression. She saw regret. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen a lot of junior officers come through, convinced they've found the next big threat. 99% of the time, they're wrong. But that 1%, he shook his head. That 1% can cost lives. I forgot that. Sarah stood there stunned. I'm recommending you for commendation, Hawkins continued, for your analysis and your persistence in ensuring the intelligence reached the right people. I'm also formally apologizing for my handling of this situation. Sir, I don't need a commendation. I need the system to change so this doesn't happen again. Hawkins studied her for a moment. You're an unusual officer, Martinez. I'm an officer who wants to do her job, sir, and have that job be taken seriously. Fair enough. He opened a folder on his desk. Major Briggs has been relieved of his supervisory position in intelligence. His replacement is being brought in from DIA, someone who understands modern analytical methods. He looked at her. You'll be reinstated to active intelligence analysis with immediate effect. Your algorithm will be reviewed for official adoption, and I'm personally recommending you for promotion to major. Sarah felt dizzy. 48 hours ago, she'd been filing paperwork. Now this. Additionally, Hawkins said, I'm assembling a new task force, advanced threat analysis, small team, high clearance, direct reporting line to CENTCOM. I want you to lead it. Now Sarah knew she must be hallucinating. Sir, you've proven you can identify threats others miss. You've proven you have the courage to stand by your analysis even when everyone tells you you're wrong. Those are exactly the qualities I need for this unit. He stood. Of course, you'll have to learn to work within the system. But I think we can find a middle ground between blind protocol and going rogue. Sarah's mind raced. This was more than vindication. This was exactly the kind of position where she could make a real difference. What do you say, Captain? Or should I say soon-to-be Major Martinez? Sarah straightened. I accept, sir. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You'll be dealing with classified intelligence at the highest levels. The stakes will be even higher. And you'll be working directly with me, which means when you think I'm wrong, you'll have to tell me to my face. I think I've proven I can do that, sir. For the first time, Hawkins smiled, just slightly. Yes, you have. 3 months later, Sarah sat in a secure briefing room in the Pentagon, surrounded by officers from every branch of the military. On the screen behind her were satellite images, data patterns, and threat assessments. Her threat assessments. The Advanced Threat Analysis Task Force had been operational for 6 weeks, and they'd already identified 2 potential attacks and 1 weapons smuggling operation that traditional intelligence had missed. Sarah's algorithm had been officially adopted across military intelligence networks, and her team of 4 analysts, carefully selected for their innovative thinking and ability to see patterns others missed, was becoming known as the unit that found what everyone else overlooked. But today was different. Today she was briefing the Joint Chiefs of Staff. As you can see from the pattern analysis, Sarah continued, using a laser pointer to highlight key data points. There's been a systematic shift in insurgent vehicle movements over the past 30 days. They're avoiding traditional routes and using civilian infrastructure in a way we haven't seen before. General Crawford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. And you believe this indicates what, Major Martinez? Sarah had gotten used to her new rank, though it still felt strange sometimes. Sir, I believe they're preparing for a coordinated strike on multiple targets simultaneously. The pattern suggests at least 5 different cells moving into position. Based on vehicle movements alone, another general skeptical. Based on vehicle movements, communications patterns, financial transactions, and social media activity, sir. When you overlay all 4 data streams, the pattern is clear. She pulled up another slide showing the correlation. My team has identified probable coordinates for each cell. We're still refining the target assessment, but we estimate they'll be ready to move within 2 weeks. Crawford studied the screen. And you're confident in this analysis? Sarah thought about Fob Henderson, about the general who dismissed her, about the 3 soldiers who'd been wounded because warning signs were ignored. Yes, sir. I'm confident, Crawford nodded. Then we'll task additional assets to verify and prepare response options. Good work, Major. After the briefing, Sarah walked through the Pentagon corridors with Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who'd been brought stateside to work with her task force. He'd been the one who'd listened when it mattered, and she'd specifically requested him for her team. You handled those stars like a pro, Hayes said with a grin. I've had practice dealing with generals who don't want to hear what I have to say. Yeah. Well, now they're all competing to get your briefings. Times change, they did change. But Sarah hadn't forgotten how hard she'd had to fight to be heard. And she was determined that the analysts working under her would never face what she'd faced. Back at Fort Carson, where her task force was based, Sarah held a team meeting. Her 4 analysts gathered around the conference table. 2 men, 2 women, all of them brilliant, all of them previously underutilized in traditional intelligence roles. Okay, what have we got? Sarah asked. Captain Jennifer Park, a signals intelligence specialist, pulled up a communications intercept. Possible chatter about weapons transfer in Eastern Europe. It's fragmentary, but there's something there. Show me. For the next hour, they dug into the data. Sarah had created an environment where questions were encouraged, where unconventional thinking was valued, where you didn't need permission to explore a hunch. It was the kind of team she'd wished she'd had 3 months ago. Later that evening, Sarah was packing up to leave when General Hawkins appeared at her office door. Their relationship had evolved into something like mutual respect, though it had been hard-earned on both sides. Major, got a minute? Of course, sir. Hawkins entered and closed the door. I've been asked to testify before Congress next month about intelligence failures and how to prevent them. They want to know about Phoebe Henderson, about what went wrong and what we've changed. Sarah nodded slowly. And I'm going to tell them the truth, that we failed to listen to good intelligence because it came from a source we didn't expect, delivered in a way that didn't fit our standard procedures, that our bias nearly cost American lives. He met her eyes. I'm also going to tell them about your task force, about how changing our approach has already prevented attacks. Sir, if you're worried about bad press, I'm not worried about press, Major. I'm worried about getting this right, about making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to the next talented analyst who sees something we're missing. He paused. I'd like you to testify as well. If you're willing, Sarah considered. Testifying before Congress meant putting herself out there, reliving the experience of being dismissed and mocked. But it also meant maybe changing the system for others. I'll do it, sir. Good, and Major? I know I said this before, but I want you to hear it again. I'm sorry for not listening, for not taking your analysis seriously, for letting my assumptions about protocol matter more than the intelligence itself. I appreciate that, sir. After he left, Sarah sat alone in her office, looking at the photos on her wall. Her team, the coordinates that had started everything, a commendation letter from the soldiers at FOB Henderson, thanking the unknown analyst whose warning had saved their lives. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Saw your name in the Defense Intelligence Briefing Summary. You're becoming famous in the contractor world. Proud of you. Sarah smiled and typed back, not looking for famous, just looking to keep people safe. His response came quickly. You're doing both. Some of us knew you would. Sarah stood and walked to her window. The sun was setting over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere out there, soldiers were on patrol. Intelligence officers were analyzing data. Threats were forming and being countered. And now, finally, her voice was part of that conversation. Not because she was the loudest or the highest ranking, but because she'd been right, and she'd refused to back down even when everyone told her to. 6 months after FOB Henderson, Sarah sat in front of the Congressional Committee on Armed Services. Cameras lined the room. Representatives sat in a semicircle above her. General Hawkins had testified earlier in the day. Now it was her turn. Major Martinez, the committee chair began, Can you walk us through what happened when you first identified the threat to Forward Operating Base Henderson? Sarah took a breath and began. She told them about the data, the patterns, the communications intercept. She told them about being dismissed, mocked, and reassigned. She told them about Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, the one officer who'd listened. And she told them about watching the news, knowing she'd been right but that people had still been hurt. Major, in your professional opinion, what failed in this situation? A representative asked. Sarah chose her words carefully. Sir, the system failed to account for intelligence that didn't fit expected parameters. We had robust procedures for handling traditional intelligence. But when something came through a non-traditional method, in this case, my personally developed algorithm, the system didn't know how to evaluate it. So it defaulted to dismissal. And how do we fix that? By creating pathways for unconventional analysis to be heard and verified, not just dismissed. By training leaders to evaluate intelligence based on merit, not just on whether it came through approved channels, and by protecting analysts who raise warnings, even if those warnings turn out to be wrong. We need people to speak up, not stay silent for fear of career consequences. Another representative leaned forward. Major, you went around your chain of command. You contacted outside sources. You shared intelligence with unauthorized personnel. Do you believe that was appropriate? Sarah met the representative's eyes. Sir, I believe that saving American lives is always appropriate. Should I have had to go around my chain of command? No. Did I feel I had any other choice when official channels dismissed me? Also no. The ideal system is one where I never have to make that choice because good intelligence is taken seriously the first time. But surely you understand the importance of protocol in military operations? I absolutely do, sir. I also understand that protocols should serve our mission, not obstruct it. When protocols prevent us from protecting our people, those protocols need to be examined and changed. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Sarah answered every question honestly, even the ones designed to make her look like a rogue officer who didn't follow rules. She didn't back down, didn't apologize for pursuing the truth. But she also acknowledged the legitimate concerns about maintaining security and chain of command. When it was over, she stepped out of the hearing room exhausted but feeling like maybe, just maybe, something would actually change. In the hallway, General Hawkins waited. You did well in there, Major. Thank you, sir. Think it'll make a difference? I think you just became the face of intelligence reform in the military. So yes, I'd say it'll make a difference. He started walking and Sarah fell into step beside him. You know, when this all started, I thought you were a problem I needed to manage. Now I think you might be the best intelligence officer I've ever worked with. Sir, I'm just doing my job. No, Major, you're changing how we do our jobs. There's a difference. 1 year after Fob Henderson, Sarah received a call from Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. Sarah, turn on the news. You're not going to believe this. She switched on the television to see a press conference. The Secretary of Defense was announcing a new military-wide intelligence protocol. The Martinez Protocol, they were calling it, named after her. It created formal channels for analysts to report urgent intelligence through alternative chains of command if their immediate superiors were unresponsive. It established protection for analysts who raised credible warnings. It mandated review of intelligence by multiple independent analysts before dismissal, and it created fast-track verification processes for threats identified through innovative methods. Sarah sat down slowly, staring at the screen. Her phone rang. General Hawkins, congratulations, Major. You just changed military intelligence doctrine. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing what you're doing. We need more officers like you. Officers who care more about getting it right than about following the easy path. After the call ended, Sarah thought about the journey. From dismissed analyst to task force leader to congressional testimony to this, her name on a protocol that would protect future analysts from what she'd experienced. But more than that, she thought about the soldiers at Fob Henderson. The ones who'd come home because one person had refused to stop fighting for the truth. That night, Sarah received an email from a young lieutenant she'd never met. The subject line read, "Thank you. Major Martinez, I'm a junior intelligence analyst at a base in Germany. Last week, I identified what I believed was a credible threat. My supervisor dismissed it. But because of the Martinez protocol, I was able to report it through alternative channels. The threat was verified and neutralized. I don't know if I would have had the courage to keep pushing if I didn't know that someone else had fought this fight before me. Thank you for making it possible for people like me to be heard. Sarah read the email 3 times, her eyes blurring with tears. This was why it had all been worth it. She typed a response. Lieutenant, thank you for having the courage to speak up. Never stop trusting your analysis. Never stop fighting for the truth. And never let anyone make you feel small for doing your job with integrity. You didn't just save lives this week. You proved that the system can work when good people refuse to stay silent. I'm proud to serve alongside you. She hit send and closed her laptop. Outside her window, the Colorado night was clear and full of stars. Somewhere under those same stars, soldiers were sleeping safely because people like that lieutenant were watching over them, because analysts were empowered to speak up, because the system finally was learning to listen. Sarah Martinez had gone from dismissed captain to decorated major, from mocked analyst to intelligence reform pioneer. But the title she was most proud of was the one that had never changed. Soldier. Someone who'd sworn an oath to protect and defend. Someone who'd kept that oath even when it cost her everything. And now, someone who was making sure the next generation of analysts could do the same. The general had dismissed her report, but enemy coordinates had proved her right, and in proving her right, they'd changed everything.